Hi, you're listening to Mindset Spelled with AI, a bi-weekly tech podcast that is shaping what you know and think about AI. My name is David. I'm a tech journalist and entrepreneur, and here with me is Philip, an AI executive. And Philip, we have a very special guest in the Mindset podcast for the very first time. And let me welcome Dr. Amina A. Qutub. Hello, Dr. Qutub.
Hi, David. Hi, Philip. It's great to meet you in this podcast.
So we're recording this a few days before you visit Slovakia. Um, just a warm up question: what are you most excited about during this visit?
I've always heard of Slovakia's rich culture and how beautiful it is. It also has a really growing startup environment, and I'm super excited about the itinerary I was given. So I'm getting to meet leaders in tech and in pharma, along with university administrators, medical faculty, doctors, students. It's really actually the kaleidoscope of meeting all of them that I'm so excited about. It'll give me a week where I have an intensive insight into all of what's going on in Slovakia's tech and in clinical applications, along with the rich history. So I'm very excited. I'll be able to hopefully both learn this week and then also have an eye out for building lasting collaborations.
We will be happy to have you. So you are a biomedical engineer, AI researcher, entrepreneur, and one could say even an artist, as projects you worked on were hanged in museums. So when someone asks you what do you do, like how do you even begin to answer that question? Like I wanted to do like your whole bio, even with like a short version. I would be here probably a couple of minutes.
Oh, thank you. Actually, that's a super interesting question. I recall one of my friends saying that I had this unique ability to find something in common with anyone I talk to because of the different areas I've been in. And I was thinking about that when you asked the question. And in a part, it's whenever somebody asks what I do, it's trying to find a common point of what would they be most interested in about my background to answer that question. But largely, I try to identify patterns of communication across all scales. So, all the way from the molecular to systems to interactions between humans.
So you co-founded two startups, Lia and Palo Bio, both focused on pushing the boundaries in healthcare. The question I had was like, what like unmet? Because it's always like right, like you're looking for some problem to solve, like some unmet need. So what was it with these?
Yes, Leia started from a large research project that we're building clinical support tools for emergency room clinicians across the state of Texas in 7 hospitals. And it solves the problem of this. You can imagine you're a busy clinician or you're a busy nurse in an emergency room setting, and you're trying to make the best decisions as to how to care for an individual. Some of those split second decisions are ones that can be augmented by AI and computer knowledge, especially when you're talking about not just these elite research hospitals, but rural areas or even on the field, on the battlefield, or out in a rural area in Texas. To have a support system that can answer how do you best care for an individual with a trauma is the goal of what Leo provides. And it does it in a way which is as human, as AI as possible, compared to what the doctors would provide. Apollo Bio fills a different niche. Each of us have our own unique data that is representative of ourselves, particularly representative of our neurological data and our behaviors. And right now, we don't really capitalize on that, right? We don't have full control of all of our neurological data. And so, especially maybe right now in the US, I can't decide I want to share different parts of my data related to my neurological health with specific doctors at any given time. Apollo Bio provides a method to do that in a way where each individual can have control over their own data and they can interpret all of this very complex data themselves and also decide who are they going to share it with. Are they going to share it with a potentially a physician or a caregiver or a therapist or a coach? And they have that control over the data. So those are the two niches that those two startups fill.
Dr. Qutub, I mean, you're working on an intersection of computational models and biology. So I'm really itchy to ask you this question, so because you're also working on like human-centered AI. So what is your take on how should the human-centered AI look like, especially in medicine, which is human-centered by definition, right? Unless you work for veterinary. So what is a human-centered AI concept that you believe in?
Really good, excellent question. Thank you, Philip. One of the things that we're trying to do with the AI is to be able to make it indistinguishable, the Turing test for AI in clinical applications. So to apply it to a clinician, you have to prove that it's making the same type of decisions or responding in the same way that a doctor would. So what we're doing is we're literally mathematically comparing the output of these large language models to a battery of clinicians' responses to those same prompt or cases. And we're saying how good, we're scoring how good each model response is. And we're comparing many different iterations of our model. And so we're using the human expert insight into vetting all of these models. But we're still missing a whole bunch of things that a doctor sees. So I had a conversation with our trauma care physician lead at the medical center today. And one of the things when you think about what an AI can't see is it or smell or sense is all these senses. And we take for granted that right now you're in a room where you're smelling the environment and you're breathing an amount of oxygen, CO2. All of that can inform your decisions. And so what we really want to do, like the cutting edge would be human-centric AI would be incorporating the senses that we feel and we smell and we hear in the environment. And all of those plays into a clinical decision. So that's what we're trying to do next. Can we incorporate that into the AI?
It's interesting, and it leads me to a little bit of a follow-up question on that, because when you spoke about Turing test, it's essentially designed to kind of convince us that the machine we're talking of is at par or even beyond the kind of a human way of doing that, right? Well, but in medicine, so does the human-centered AI also account for all the flaws and maybe kind of real human things of the doctors, or does it try to take the best of the medical knowledge and like augment it with whatever human, like surpassing the flaws of the humans? How do you stand about, like, can it be as perfect, so the point that it is not believable to the human, that it is even kind of an entity to have a discussion with?
Yes, absolutely. This is an excellent follow-up. So you're right, the AI should be able to surpass the humans in certain cases. And certainly that's what we see in some of the cases that we apply it to. Um, but there's also this other part that AI can do. Are either of you chess fans? No, play chess or
Yes, I do.
follow
Yeah,
the development of
just
chess? And
Yes.
occasionally.
so I sometimes make this analogy where if you think about the grandmasters and them playing against computers, eventually the computers got better than the grandmasters, but it was from training not on just one grandmaster's data set. It was training on all of the grandmasters and even people who perform poorly data. So what the AI can do that an individual clinician cannot do, and this gets to Philip's question, is that it can train from the wisdom of many clinicians working together. And so in your emergency room right now, you might be limited to one or two other of your colleagues giving you insight into a case. But with AI, you could pull from potentially the wisdom of hundreds of expert clinicians who are at the top of their game. And even if you think about a tired physician who's on the 12th hour of a shift, that person might want to pull from their own best decision making at a time when they were their optimal. And AI enables that. So that's where I see that, yes, we should be
Mhm.
pushing the borders and boundaries and allow AI to take the best of the humans and build from that. That's
All right. I would also like to ask you a question about, I mean, I work in AI myself, and I have to say that very often when I like follow the most recent development, which is getting harder and harder over the time with the speed that it's moving on. But when I like look at the news or like the topics that raise the public discourse, it's usually mostly things which are kind of commercially useful. So let me give you an example. So if you look at Google, it's much more known for Nano Banana or let's say Gemini than AlphaFold, right? So why do you think is then the AI in medicine and biological research so underreported? like what is either biomedicine doing wrong or what is a missing ingredient, so that it gets the center stage, which probably it deserves, because like what else can we use AI to save lives?
That's also an excellent question to ask, but I think you touched on it already. It's the accessibility. So Nano Banana, the Gemini, ChatGPT, all of these are really user-friendly. And the AI tools that are being developed for biology, AlphaFold, to use it, you are coming from a domain expertise of needing to be able to design a new compound or a new protein or think about a new structure. And not everyone has that background or skill set. But I think it is changing. There is a large growth of AI in bio and AI in medicine. And there's also going to be new algorithms that are out there that are going to make it more user friendly for people. But it's that there's this user interface, I think, that makes it very accessible, and that there isn't a barrier or educational background that you need to be able to use the tools that differentiates the AI in bio from the commercial AI.
One of the projects you also like are connected to is iRemedy ACT, or is it ACT or is it ACT?
We say ACT, so advances in care for trauma using AI. But yes, I'm leading that with colleagues at the Medical Center in Trauma Care.
We're recording this before you come to Slovakia, right? So it is just 2 days after the Emmys in US were, given out, and one of the shows that actually won the Emmys was The Pit, right? The HBO drama series about basically it was supposed to be like an ER follow up, but because of some like IP rights, they couldn't name it like that. But anyway, the one of the like subplots was that the ER is always full, right? And the doctors have to kind of like very quickly decide who to bring in. And do I understand it that like this is supposed to help with that, or is it something else?
Uh, that is one of the key goals. So one of the key tasks that the AI is posed with for the iRemedy Act project is to make transfer decisions. In Texas, as an example, there's these trauma one level centers that have the best equipment and can handle these um, trauma cases that include stroke or other cases of extreme trauma, which other tier centers like level fours or threes can't. So there's a split second decision that needs to be made very quickly to decide whether to transfer a patient or bring them immediately to a level one if they're not near a level one. And it's a matter of waiting the time, the type of severity of the injury, and what resources are present locally. So that, yes, that's a key question that's being addressed.
So how do you connect that to AI? My first thought would be, um, so we keep hearing about like these smart glasses, right? Like smart glasses with a camera and a microphone, possibly in the future maybe some other sensors. Like is it something like that? That the doctor has like a special device, a smart device that helps with the diagnosis. Like maybe not now, but in the future, obviously, because it's still like work in progress and very rudimentary maybe for the use cases. But I did ask this recently on a conference, some medtech executives, and they said it's like one of the things they are like really looking into. But there's also like some technological innovation that needs to happen first. So I'm curious how you stand on it, and what's the like, how do you connect those two?
Yes. Is the question related to both how do we design the architecture of the AI and then how do we put it into a clinical setting where it could be implemented? So there are two parts to that question. So I'll address the first one. Right now, you touched on it too, that there's multiple parts of decision making when there's an emergency. And so we've designed the current AI system of Leia as a multi-agent platform. So we have specialists. So we have a specialist in stroke. We have a specialist in transfer decisions. We have a specialist in decision making on the clinical case and diagnostic. And each of those specialists are trained and optimized on different sets of data and scored by experts in the specific task they're posed with. And then we're right now not yet implementing, I mean, it's not working in the clinic right now. But to your point, we're thinking, and we're starting to do these conversations now, we want to do clinical testing, and literally meaning that is the doctor going to perform better with this AI tool, Leia, or not? And to do that, you have to work with each hospital. Each one might have a different mode and modality that could be optimal for their hospital. So for some, it would be voice activated or text activated. And for some, it could be on a computer, but for most, it would be like a sensor-based device that's activated. So we're doing that in a tailored way. So it's not one size fits all in terms of the actual implementation part. And then we're also thinking more broadly, if this is going to be something that's in remote or extreme areas and environments, it also has to be flexible in how it's deployed.
It's interesting that you mentioned voice because one of the very early use cases with AI during COVID was, I think, this research that based on how people are coughing, they could be diagnosed either they have COVID or not. So it's like really interesting because I mean, like a lay person, right? Like I look at it and I think like, okay, so like you need to see and you need to kind of maybe feel, and those are like the top use cases. But actually, it's like you said, like multimodal in a way.
Yes. And you also have to think about in the emergency setting, it's often chaotic. You have all this other background
Mm.
noise, and the
Mm.
AI needs to be able to distinguish who's talking to it. And these are all constraints of what we're building.
Anina, you're one of the few people on this planet I can ask next question, so I'm definitely
Okay.
going to take my chances. You worked in environment where you also try to model brain parts and like do a mathematical and then probably cyber models of different parts of the brain. So I'd like to ask you this question. I'm unfortunately old enough to remember AI before even deep learning, so still in like machine learning times. And over the time, especially with like risk of the deep learning, the AI was trying to get inspired to some extent by neurons or the architecture of the brain. Especially, I think the visual part, or like computer vision, is pretty well trying to emulate the way that the visual perception is done in a human bodies. But then lately, I feel like that the development has a little bit diverged. Now, if I look at the way that the modern AI systems are trying to treat memory or like recollection or things like morale and like putting a guidelines, they don't seem to follow the human analogy or human prescription or human biological models anymore. So my question to you, in the pursuit of AGI, which seems to be like a holy grail of the AI movement, to what extent do you believe that AI development could still benefit, and what are maybe the areas of computational modeling and neurobiological setups that AI has not incorporated that probably would help AI on the development to better and more performing models?
Phillips, you're right. There was a divergence on the development of neuro-inspired AI. There's also a resurgence, or there's a growth in neuro-inspired or neuromorphic AI, perhaps in a different direction than you mentioned, and more towards the design of edge computing or devices which can function in low energy environments. So you're optimizing the structure of a physical device, and its computing by being inspired by the architecture of the human brain and its efficiency. And that is a surging area in the US. And my university, there's a Drisha Kudithmapudi runs a new Thor Center of Excellence for that area. And I know there's a lot of growth in industry in that area. So those are, I would say, maybe loosely, given that I also study physically what the cells look like in a dish, those are loosely modeling, but really still inspired by actual neurons and how they communicate. Whereas the large language models, I think this is maybe what you're touching on, these generative models are completely outside of the architecture that we think of as the human brain. And yet I think you're going to see that as we learn more about how these systems, the generative AI works, especially the large and multimodal models work, that we're going to find ways to bring in more knowledge about the human brain to optimize their behaviors. So you're going to see more hybrid-based models, which include something that's informed by the structure of the human brain. There's a whole nother area of research in thinking about the brain is not just neurons, it's a whole bunch of other cell types. And each of those cell types have a different way of computing and consuming energy. And so I'm really excited about newer work that might be done and might be inspired by other parts of the brain, the immune response of the brain, or the vasculature of the brain working with the neurons. And those are also emerging areas. But you're right, it's interesting to see how the growth of different areas has been informed or not been informed by the actual brain.
Yeah, that's forced me to diverge a little bit for one more follow-up. So here's the thing. It is obvious that we're trying to emulate the human intelligence and maybe the brain processes in general with the AI now, at least for like the commercial part, not maybe the clinical part that you are more versed on, but most people kind of understanding AI, we're trying to get to the quality of a thinking processes or let's say processing as the biological brains have. Now, but biological brain are just hugely more efficient in comes to energy. Like to run a human brain is significantly less energetically consuming than to run an LLM or in a data center. So I had like this thought-provoking question I wanted to address to you. So as there were many technologies that are trying to merge the chips into the heads or like trying to communicate with the brain parts through either direct connection electrodes or whatever transmission sensors. So is there a way for humanity to ever actually combine the efficiency of the human biological brains and like a computational needs, or let's say well, we already see that AI can go beyond in thinking and reasoning than most of the humans are. So is there a way for merging this? And do you see this coming around the corner, or this is more of a sci-fi version of the story?
But that's also really exciting. It's happening now. So there already are these hybrid-based experimental models that combine living brain cells with physical computing devices, so that you're asking the neurons in a dish or in a sphere or in a mimic of the brain, a mimic of the brain tissue, to do tasks where it interacts with something that's physical. There's also a lot of startup companies that are looking at brain machine interfaces where you have this physical connection between a biological system and a computing device. And so we're already augmenting the human brain in a sense by computing and by AI. But when we think about that, there's this counterpoint to the fact that the human brain is energy efficient. It is also incredibly fragile in other ways, and it's very sensitive to many different things. We think of it largely as an electrical, many of the discussions around AI think of the brain electrically, but there's all this chemical and biochemical sensing and physical sensing that every cell it does when it interacts with its environment. And so I would say there's such a need for discovery to understand how cells in the environment interact, not just electrically, but biochemically, for us to make leaps and bounds in augmenting these hybrid-based systems where you have this interface between cell biology and a computing device. But at a small scale, it's happening already. So certain tasks, you can get this combination hybrid or ability to have a merger between the biological system and a computing system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, just the last bit. So how far do you believe we are probably from these things getting merged and being more, let's say, main stage or mainframe in use?
So there are clinical trials now. You've probably seen the press releases on Neuralink, and there's a bunch of other startups that have been even further along on some of the studies, where you have this interface with the human brain. But there's also other work. There's startups working on how do you trigger a drone by a biological system, and it's informed by the way the living system interacts with and can be trained to do a specific computing tasks. I think that area will require a lot of deep expertise at the intersection of bio, neuroscience, and AI, and that's happening now. So where we are in 5 years, it will be a revolutionary leap from where we are right now. So when you ask me that question, I hope I get to talk with you in 5 years and you can see where it is. Where people describe AGI now, I actually think if you think about the ramifications of what you're asking right now, that's maybe the cooler or more interesting areas, this intersection between living systems and these physical devices. And that's going to see transformative leaps and really help out individuals who might have a neurological condition or move the stage forward in ability to compute things which we never thought were possible.
Absolutely. Well, let me go a little bit on a lighter frame here. Whenever people are studying data science or kind of computational things and they come across confusion metrics, and they're trying like evaluating the models, of course, life sciences is brought as a strong argument for recall versus efficiency, because in most of the life sciences, the actual kind of treating of false negatives and false positives is very different to, let's say, a marketing scenario. But I want to take that even further. So in biological AI, or like AI which is aimed at helping medicine and biological life sciences, it is really often the matter of life and death, right? So a wrong suggestion or wrong decision, or like a wrong factor indication might be literally detrimental to health of real individuals, right? So how do you go around working in this area and building the trustworthy for yourself and for your own teams, and maybe for like funding entities of your research, but also to the patients themselves? Because very often I know that there's a lot of like clinical trials and like stages of proving that this works, but still ultimately we know that none of the AI is fully deterministic. It's always to a great extent or to some extent not deterministic. So how do you go around building trustworthy models in AI in your area, which is like super sensitive on being trustworthy?
It's a point that we spend a lot of time thinking about and working on, absolutely. And that's partially gets back to your other question, why don't you see more of AI and bio out there? Because it's this huge bar. If you're making life or death decisions, that's very different than if you're just putting a text to be modified in ChatGPT. So we do a lot of things. Every stage of the design of the AI is tested. So when you embed a text as an example, each algorithm, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini as a base algorithm, has a different embedding, and that can bias a response, and it can lead to different changes that you may not have interpreted. So one of the first things we do, we score the embeddings, and we score them for medical text that's relevant to emergency cases as an example, and to see how do we optimize that. We also put guardrails on hallucinations. So if there's certain triggers, you can identify that very quickly. So there's multiple large language models that are themselves judges and providing those guardrails. We also restrict the scope of each of our models, and we have another hierarchical model that does model checking. All of these are parts of it. But we also never say this is a model that acts alone. It's like a autopilot. You don't say, you never fly a plane with, right now, we're not flying planes without a pilot in the cockpit. And the same thing for our medical colleagues. They're not going to use the AI right now without themselves making a decision. So that's the biggest guardrail against the negative effects you might have of the LLMs. But we also run them hundreds of times for each query to identify what is the scope and the boundaries of which it could respond. And we try to put a number to that rare chance that you're describing, so we can present that. So if anyone's going to be working with our device or purchasing the AI, they would know the risks that they might be facing, given what we've done for testing. But again, it's again the analogy I would say with the pilot. There's an autopilot there, but the manual ability to fly a plane always has to be there for right now.
One one of the things we always debate on this podcast is which model is better, which is more efficient, which is costly, whether to run it on the cloud, whether to run it locally. Is like what's the like how do you think about that, right? Like, is it for you efficiency? Is it for you the cost? Is it for you I want to have complete control, so I'm training it and fine-tuning it basically on like a local server? What's your approach to this? I'm super curious, really.
Yeah, that's also something we think about a lot. So we do need different scenarios. So we need to be able to be like offline for applications that are in rural areas or in space, for example. So we do have models that are these mini models that are trained without the cloud or without being able to access the internet, which are different models based algorithms than are ones we test and are vetted more routinely. And what we do, it gets back to that other question that I was addressing, like the guardrails we put in place. For each of our models, we start with the base algorithm, which we're trying. So we don't want to be wedded to one because we're not a commercial entity in this project. The iRemedy Act isn't, we're initially a research group that was funded. So we're testing Grok, we're testing Gemini, we're testing versions of Grok and Gemini, we're testing OpenAI's, ChatGPT's versions, we're testing Anthropic, we're testing the open source ones. And we're asking, how do these score on different tasks? How is their embedding scored on different medical tasks? And then we're adding in our features and the training data we have for each of them and our prompts. And then if you slightly change a prompt, you also get a slightly different response from each of these models. So we want to know how sensitive is each of them. So there's a lot of work fine-tuning and testing out all these parameter changes to see. So it's not like I can tell you, oh, this model overall is best. We're asking specifically, this model for this task and this part of the calculations is optimal under this decision process. And then for another decision or for another task, we have a different model that we would default to. So yeah, that in itself, that's why I think in partially there's these very high salaries that are going out there for AI engineers and researchers right now, because it's still an art, and to be able to know all the parts of the AI that go into the development and to optimize that.
Yeah, one thing which I wanted to touch upon in this discussion also is that basically in many aspects, humanity and businesses and organizations hope for AI to augment the capabilities of humans. Well, there are a few which think of replacing humans, but I think most of the forward-looking people would rather go for an augmenting than fully replacing a model. So I would like to hear your thoughts, how you think about it. So what are the areas where you believe we could and should augment the humans most with the AI? Maybe in the area which is like relevant for your work. And maybe like a second question to that. So how to make sure we stop at the right point and we don't like bring this augmentation to the overreaching point?
So one of the impetus for the startup company Apollo Bio is to be able to augment communication for individuals who are not able to communicate themselves. So you can think of a child who has a neurodevelopmental condition or an adult who has neurodegeneration. They may not be able to use these AI tools that are standard in the way we can use them to communicate. So there's this great need to be able to develop tools to enable them to communicate. So I see that as a emphasis area of where we can make the most impact. And in that case, you're helping people. You're augmenting a human's natural abilities in that case, and you're providing a very clear case of improving somebody's quality of life. And so I think I keep thinking of that question: are you improving quality of life by whatever you're developing? And that also, Apollo Bio also addresses the question of sharing data. You're augmenting somebody's quality of life because you're allowing them control over their own data and sharing that data. Leia also has that to it too. You're augmenting. You're not replacing any human decision. The human's still making a decision. But if I go back to the cases I've alluded to, the medical cases, in that case, probably all of us know of a medical case that could have gone better. There would be a better decision for somebody that could have helped the quality of life of an individual or saved a life. If you were able to, all of us would probably say, yes, I would love to have all this rich knowledge of all these prior hundreds of thousands of cases to learn from, to train from. If humans could do that ourselves, we would be doing it. So that's what I think AI is able to do. The augmentation part is such a key part. But I don't see it replacing humans, replacing certain tasks that humans do, but replacing the decisions in the context that we're working with them. It's really augmenting decisions. It's really augmenting communication.
Speaking of fears, there's right. So there are like always like two sides to things, right? Like one is like, oh, we are AI positive and pro AI, and then there is the other side. I feel like that's gaining some more traction. More like in places in Europe, I see it, not as much in US or other places, which is like about more about like fear of AI, etc. And this also comes to, I guess, to you in some ways when you're introducing these AI tools or like AI based experiments to clinics, right? You go to doctors. What's your take on like how do you approach that if you need to convince someone or like explain to them like, no, this is an advancement, just as it was like when they introduced penicillin. So this is kind of like a next step to that.
One, I don't say it quite so optimistically, like if we're introducing penicillin, because that would be kind of maybe overselling what we can do. And it gets to a point, I think it's a communication with the clinicians. It's a constant feedback and getting their input on the AI that's enabling the AI to have such an impact in this setting. Because it wasn't as if I could build this alone. Not at all. It's really the input of our clinical colleagues. And so actually in the beginning, the way this started, we were given a grant from the state of Texas. And originally I applied by myself with my team, just AI experts. And we didn't have trauma care physicians on our team. And the oversight committee for the funders had this insight to match us with a team of clinicians who had wanted to have a new data repository across the state and to learn from retrospective and prospective data. And without that forced, I would say like forced marriage, it went really well. Without that type of communication where we had this funding and requirement to work together, I don't think we would have accomplished the type of AI we've built, nor would it be able to have the impact. And nor would we have the veracity and the decisions that it's making without the iterative feedback, constant feedback. Every week we're talking with our clinical colleagues and getting feedback on it. That's such a key part of making it useful. Um,
I guess you're like very much on the frontier, right? So like you're kind of like doing the research where you um trying to prove something, right? So you don't yet maybe have the data, so it's kind of like harder than to introduce some other tools. On the conference I mentioned when I was talking to these two representatives from local medtech startups, actually very innovative ones. One of the things that came up a lot, and I'm curious on your take because you're coming to us from US where it's like much more free. They told me that regulation is holding them back in terms of like speed of progress. Is this a EU thing or is it same in the US when it comes to medtech? And is there a difference between advancements in AI as a whole and AI when it comes to biomedicine, medtech AI, and these kind of things that are connected to healthcare?
yeah, it's an excellent question. So right now we're still trying to figure out on the approval side, what are the requirements, especially when you think about these large language decision support tools. How do you regulate it when some of the regulators wouldn't actually know the nuts and bolts behind what goes into the model? So the regulation actually comes in a different format. I see it as these self-guidelines that are requirements of peers in the field and requirements of our clinical colleagues. And it comes really early. So for us to be able to train on, you mentioned data, for us to be able to train on people's data, we have to go through regulations at every hospital and every university. there's a sign off on accessing the data, as an example. So that's an early process step that helps protect people, and that also has an ability to put in a regulation which isn't forced at a later stage in the technology development. But it's there, and it's not. It's still present, and it took, I would say, 6 to 9 months to get 7 hospitals to share, as an example, data in a format we could start to train on it for AI. So there's that type of a different type of regulation. In terms of the regulation of the device itself or the AI tool in the clinic, that's one also where we're trying to figure out, what does that landscape look like? What does a clinical trial look like for an AI assistant? And so that's really just shaping it up right now. I don't yet see it as a bottleneck. I think in the U.S., a lot of it is, you think more that that it's there's these other obligations. There's this worry about legal ramifications if you're wrong, or there's ethical obligations in medical fields that are the constraints and that are the regulators. So there's this high degree of self-regulation and this high bar for benchmarking for medical AI, which comes before you think you'd go to the FDA or you get approval other ways. And so, as an example, like OpenAI has a health benchmarking set for AI medical applications. There's a lot of startup companies that are doing that. We're doing our own for emergency and for trauma care.
Dr. Tagubi, let me maybe close with a bit more lighthearted question. So you are at a frontier of AI. You know the models left and right, most of them at least, because you have to kind of put them through the heavy testing and combining and research. So, but when you close the door on your office and you like walk into your usual human life, what are the areas of AI that you most appreciate already, and maybe that you most miss, where you would appreciate AI to be more prominent?
Yeah, that's excellent. I would say that the tasks that you mentioned in the very, very beginning, these easy, user-friendly tasks, AI is outstanding. It's really super cool to be able to drop in an image or even text and have a video, an animation of a short film, as an example. Most of us are now using AI to help with writing or to help with a speech, as an example. So those are really convenient and very helpful. But you also touched on it, Philip, earlier, that we're not seeing life changes, life or death decisions that are right now currently dependent on AI. And we're not yet seeing a lot of people who are truly benefiting in terms of their health by some of the AI that could be out there. And there's certain ways they are. So I see a gap. I mean, many of us, including my family, have individuals who have unique needs and unique neurological needs. And there's this huge gap between what AI can do and provide right now and what they need. And right now, what they need usually is required by a human, and many humans often. So there's this gap in the ability for some of the things I talked about earlier, the touch, the taste, the senses we have, all those go into how we interact with other people and how we care for other people. And AI isn't at a point where it's able to care for people like a nurse or a doctor would in that context. And it's certainly not able to do it for people who have neurological conditions. So that's where I see a really large gap and opportunity.
That's an excellent answer and a very hopeful outlook, I would say.
Thank you. It's been really fun talking to you. Can I flip the question around and ask you, where do you see, and what would you answer to that same question if you walked out the door and somebody asked you, what have you been happy with AI, and what would you like to see in the coming years?
I think I can second guess David's answer, but I like to hear it from him. So, David, what is it for you?
No, I cannot follow up with my hopes and dreams after what was said. I'm a simple man who just wants his emails get done, and that's been my hope for many years. So it's not even worth mentioning. But Philip, you're a visionary. You must have a bigger vision than mine.
No, I mean, don't downplay yourself, David. So, obviously, as for myself, I worked with more advanced levels of AI, not necessarily in the life sciences, to be honest, but the way that I look at the AI, I think that my wife had an excellent point on this one. She's actually not a technical person at all. She's more on like human sciences. And we had a walk in the park, and like I think it was like 2 or 3 years back when the ChatGPT moment came. It was kind of AI was going through the first real spring or maybe even a summer, and she asked me, like, Philip, so we invest this huge amounts of money into kind of trying to get computers as smart as we as humans are. What would the world look like if we invested the same money into making humans better themselves? So I actually missed a little bit in the recent discourse and the recent discussion, the AIs pointing to areas how to go beyond the skills of the humans. Because when I ask you the question, Dr. About the augmentation, I understand that from the medicine point of view, you are like a doctor is expected to prevent or heal health issues, right? By definition. So I would not assume that it would go all the way of making a healthy patient a more capable healthy patient, right? But that's what I would probably hope for AI to help us to not only kind of take the close the gaps, which a lot of people now look at the AI of, okay, how can it probably surpass the benchmarks of the human cognition or human tasks, but maybe how can it help humans to be augmented to be better naturally? So that's the wish I would have for a goldfish in AI.
Is it fair to say you're wishing for superhumans from AI?
Well, I'm a little bit worried to name it that way because it's easily to divert the discussion and like derail the discussion wrong way. But I think among the scientists, I would agree to that definition.
Dr. Qutub, we're looking forward to have you in Slovakia, and I would say that's all for this episode. Our guest has been Dr. Amina A. Qutub, and she will be coming to Slovakia. And you've been listening or watching the Mindset podcast, and you can follow us on every podcast platform or on YouTube. And also with me here was my co-host Philip. My name is David, and thank you.
Thank you, David and Philip.
Thank you.